Welcome to the Sephirah Center of Shamanism. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the shamanic and occult sciences. Warm welcome to my channel, whereby we break down the ancient technologies of both shamanism and the occult, bringing them into balance with the modern psychology and deep psyche. Before I start this topic, check out my membership programs. First and second links in the description. First link for my Patreon, second link for my premium membership service, which will give you access to more advanced teachings and practices, as well as more direct access to me. As I said, links are in the description. So on to today's topic. We're going to be discussing the fascinating subject of death energy. We're going to be delving into what death energy actually is, the role that it plays by default within the body and nervous system, the role it plays within our continuous evolutionary process, and how we can tap into this current of energy in a safe and sustainable way to use it for our personal transformation. This is one of the most controversial subjects within the spiritual community in general. There is a lot of misconception around death as a whole, and a lot of misconception around death energy and how to actually tap into it in an effective way. We're going to be going over shamanic techniques and methods for engaging with death energy, as well as powerful occult practices for actually downloading large quantities of death energy into your system to train your energy body to metabolize it and use it for its own personal transformation. Extremely juicy subject, so definitely stay tuned. So the death current is a fascinating current of energy that has captivated the attention of many seekers, particularly within the shamanic and occult sciences. Within many indigenous shamanic communities, death is approached as a conscious co-creator, something that needs to be welcomed both energetically and physically. The darker aspects of the occult community often view death in a similar way. I've heard death referred to as an actual spirit by some as well. My personal gnosis would also suggest the same thing, that death is actually a meta-god that is comprised of the consciousness of many other different beings, some of which are deities and some of which are actually us as well. Okay, so some of the deities that operate within the death current of energy would be Hecate, is probably the most notable one, Santa Muerte, Mortifel, and lots of other spirits that exist within this current as well. These can be seen as literal avatars of a much bigger meta-god consciousness that holds the death current within our cosmos. When we refer to the death current, we are referring specifically to a decaying energy, the pure essence of decay that flows through every living being. Psychically, from my perspective anyway, it takes on the form of a grey current of energy, very thin current of energy that is constantly flowing through the system, flowing around the body, causing what no longer serves to fall away, to decay, to clear space for something new. Everything within our reality has death energy flowing through it. Nothing would be able to change without death energy. Within our modern world, death energy is programmed as something that we all need to face at some point, physically speaking, but many do not understand that they are constantly interacting with death energy, and that anything that triggers any significant change within one's being, any ego-shattering experience, any experience that triggers any form of growth, no matter how big or small, physically or emotionally or energetically, that has to utilize the death current in order for that change to be able to take place. When we are born within this physical multiverse, we are constantly being exposed to the death energy. The death energy is flowing through the nervous system constantly and fueling a physical death and rebirth process within the different portions of our body. the cell's regeneration process is induced by the death current. Mitochondria, the process of cells dying and then being reborn, would not be possible without the death current. The death of bacterias and live cultures within the body would not be possible without the death current. So we would not be growing from babies into adults and then from adults into our elderly years without the decaying energy flowing through us. So we are all, in a sense, decaying to some extent. But how we utilize that decaying energy is going to highly depend on our relationship with both chaos and death energy. Death energy is directly linked to chaos, which is the dark feminine current within the cosmos that flows through everything to deconstruct. The feminine absorbs, it takes away realities in order to clear space for something new. So the death current is directly linked to the energies of the primordial chaos and is the current of energy that causes deconstruction and decay within the physical body and energetically. So this death current is constantly flowing through us, triggering the decaying of what no longer serves. But when we go through a significant energetic death, which happens, say, if a relationship ends, if we change jobs, something big happens like illness or within you or illness within the family around you, all of this triggers an ending of an old reality, the deconstruction of an old sense of self that is no longer serving. Okay, it triggers the shift in a reality that is necessary to be able to hold the energy of where you are moving into at that given time. So any big change utilizes death energy. Can we fight the process of death energy? Yes, but with immense difficulty. The majority of the modern world is at war with chaos. Okay, and this is a programmed belief system that has come from religion, that chaos is bad, darkness is bad, and therefore the internal shadow is refused, and chaos and deconstruction becomes something that needs to be avoided. But many people don't realize that when we are embracing too much order and we're holding on to that order, we are then opening ourselves up to more chaos and deconstruction that needs to take place in order for us to really grow. So yes, we can fight death energy. We can try and hold on to who we are. We can try and hold on to our youth and try and hold on to our older identities that we know that we have long shed or outgrown. But what that will do is that it will cause a big event to happen, whether it's on the microcosmic level or the macrocosmic level, so individually or collectively, that will basically force that change to take place. It all depends on where your soul is moving into, okay? What your soul has actually come here to do. And more than anything, the current that your soul is actually carrying you within. For example, if you engage within a deeper initiatory system such as the medicine wheel or the Kabbalah, what you're doing is that you're stepping into a current of energy. You're saying to your soul, I want to go through this energetic process. And then you're being carried through that current of energy. You're being carried through the process that that particular current of energy is going to take you on. With the Kabbalah, for example, it will be about absorbing and understanding how the organizing principles of the multiverse fit into you. The medicine wheel, it's stepping back into that continuous cycle of death and rebirth. So when you make a particular decision through your free will to move into a particular direction, then your soul will then support that, particularly if that decision is in alignment with your true self, okay? If it's in alignment with your true will. For example, if your soul has come here to like myself, to delve into the deep psyche, to delve into the shadows and really integrate the opposing forces within the self, then any decision with your free will that aligns to the soul's true will is then going to be greatly enhanced, and the soul is going to be more enthusiastic and really start carrying you through that current of energy. But because you have free will, you can resist that current of energy and go against it. And this can happen very easily when we start to experience the death energy flowing into our system, essentially killing off the older constructs that weren't ever actually us, but were actually built specifically to keep us safe from a reality that is not desired. So once we start to experience the death energy, which is normally accompanied by some form of grief or sadness, as we are grieving that older aspect of ourselves, letting go of who we thought that we were in order to embrace who we really are. And in the majority of cases, who we really are is not easily definable. So embracing death energy often means really embracing chaos, which means embracing darkness and embracing what cannot be known, and understanding that when you relax into that process and allow it to take place, that is when the real transformation is going to happen, is when the real transformation is going to take place. The biggest mistake that people make when they start being exposed to death energy, whether it's through shamanic or occult initiation, is that they start to fight the process. They start to hold on to who they think that they are. They start to really be like, okay, no, this is my sense of self. This is who I am. But then what they're doing is that they're unconsciously attaching to an identity that used to define who they are. The death energy will flow and they will experience the decaying of that identity that they are attaching to. And then it's going to be more painful as a whole. Okay, so any repression of death energy and chaos and any avoidance of that will cause it to manifest within the reality around you in a way that is more erratic and potentially more re-traumatizing in the process. So the death current is a ruthless current of decay and deconstruction that if you start working with it consciously, you need to take into consideration the fact that you are going to go through a significant death process and your physical body is going to change as a result of it. Okay, so the death current is I would say the most serious current of energy to work with, both within the occult sciences and the shamanic sciences and just in general, and is one that you do need to adequately prepare your energy system for before diving straight into it. Okay, the reason for that is because yes, we all have access to this decaying energy. It's the energy that kills the aspects of the system that is not serving the system anymore. But if we absorb too much of that energy when our system is not used to it, then it can actually severely damage the nervous system as a result of it, purely because you are absorbing so much of the energy that causes decay. And if your system is not used to holding that quantity of death energy, then the death energy will have an adverse effect and will start killing off things within the system that may actually still be serving you as a person in that respect. And that's when potential re-traumatization can happen as a result of interacting with the death current of energy, first and foremost. So there are a share of different currents of energy that are more dangerous than others and require more careful preparation before interacting with them on a very deep, intimate level. And death energy definitely, I feel, reaches the top of that list, particularly within the occult. There are certain currents of energy that do need more care and they do need more experience before diving into them straight away. I would say the death current is definitely on top of that, working actively with the death metagod, working actively with the different aspects of death energy to really embrace decay within your system. Another example of a current which works in a similar way to death energy would be the Saturnian currents. So the mysteries of Saturn, which is basically tapping into the different Saturnian divinities that hold the essence of Saturn. So Saturn can be seen as, like, again, a metagod that is sort of separated into many individual consciousness or deities that can be tapped into for different alchemical purposes. So Saturn being the main initiator and the sower of chaos and discord within the physical plane of existence, Saturn rotates anti-clockwise whilst the Earth rotates clockwise. So Saturn is seen as a great initiator energy, that brings chaos and discord in order to incite personal growth. So Saturn and the currents of Saturn are very much interconnected with the currents of death energy as a whole, because Saturn operates with a very strong death energy. The Saturnian divinities are some of the darkest divinities that you will interact with, some of which would be the Shadow Hat Man and Satan. Yeah, Satan, the actual consciousness of Satan, is a dark Saturnian spirit, and in some traditions Satan is actually seen as the planet Saturn. So the sort of initiatory energy of the planet Saturn is very much connected to death energy in that regard. So, you know, for example, my partner has in her astrology has Saturn as one of her ruling planets, and Saturn in the 8th house, which is pretty harsh trials that, you know, take place within the physical experience, pretty harsh trials as a result of the planet Saturn to induce significant evolution and metamorphosis. So death energy and the planet Saturn are directly connected, because the planet Saturn is greatly responsible for sowing chaos and discord energetically within our physical experience. And the death current then kind of piggybacks on that and then flows with the Saturnian currents. The same would be for the cliffothic currents of energy. So the dark Kabbalah, the cliffothic currents being the pure currents of primordial chaos. Death energy is strongly associated with the cliffoth as well, because the cliffoth is a process of significant deconstruction. Okay, so when you interact with the cliffothic spheres and pathways, or should I say tunnels or caverns, you are essentially tapping into realms that will require you to embrace death energy, because as you perform an initiation into a given portion of that initiatory system, you are going to actively start shedding a layer of who you thought that you were, to then embrace a repressed, exiled part of you that existed underneath, or should I say encased within, that particular persona. Work with daemonic spirits and darker currents of energy is very much connected to the death current in general, purely because the daemonic currents consume. Okay, the daemonic currents consume. This is the same with the cliffothic energies. They consume, they essentially devour what is illusionary, devour the false identities, and then our consciousness expands into its full potential at that given time before the next layer starts to unfold. So interaction with dark matter energy consciously and regularly will expose you to large quantities of death energy as a whole. So working with dark matter is a very good way to prepare your system energetically for undergoing the deeper alchemical transformation that the death current can bring you. The death current is the most dangerous current of energy to work with, but if your system is adequately prepared and you are essentially gradually training your system to essentially metabolize and alchemize death energy, then your system will become extremely resistant to death energy, extremely resistant to dark energy in general, because you are essentially merging with it and are accepting your role as becoming an aspect of death itself. And as I said, death is like a metagod that separates itself into many consciousness, one of which can be you, can be me, if we embrace and merge with death energy on a deep, intimate level. Okay, so going straight in with full initiation into the death currents when your system is not prepared and used to going through a process of deconstruction, then you are going to cause yourself some serious damage by interacting with the death energy, because it is ruthless and you expose yourself to that energy. It's a little bit like committing astral suicide if you are not adequately prepared for such an endeavor. Okay, so you have to ensure that your system is able to hold and process it in an effective way. Working with dark matter energy is an amazing way to do that. Also, merging your consciousness with an abyssal realm is extremely helpful for that as well. So the most notable would be the Qliphothic Abyss, the Da'ath. When you are merging your consciousness with the Da'ath, you are creating a merging of death energy within you. It's flowing through your system, and you are essentially becoming an aspect of death itself because you are accepting that your home is the void, and the void will deconstruct your old sense of self in order to clear space for a new reality to be built. Okay, and when we start working actively with currents of the void, whether it's through the Da'ath, whether it's through initiation into realms such as Ginnungagap, which is the primeval abyss within the Norse tradition, we need to surrender to that process of deconstruction that is inevitably going to take place when we start interacting with these realms. But when we are interacting with a realm such as the void, no matter what system of initiation we are using, we are embracing both destruction and creation. And trust me, the destruction has to come before the creation. And this is a pure and powerful lesson one can absorb from working with the death energy, is that you cannot effectively shift your reality if you are still attached to a reality that is not serving you. Okay, there has to be space within your reality to create what you actually want and actually create a reality that is actually serving your soul instead of re-traumatizing it. And the death energy, whether you work with it consciously or not, is the key component within that. So if it is that pure energy of decay and deconstruction, then tapping into it, you can only imagine that if you tap into it consciously, you can only imagine the transformation that can take place as a result of it. Okay, so adequately preparing your system by interacting with dark matter energy, by allowing yourself to let go of dynamics within the reality around you that are not serving you, embracing death energy in that regard, by letting go of things that are not serving you consciously and actively, going through systems of initiation such as the Qliphoth will gradually absorb death energy into your system and help you to metabolize it in a way that is helpful, and eventually merging your consciousness with a void plane such as the Da'ath or Ginnungagap is the most effective way to train your system to go through a process of death-induced alchemical transformation. When you start to move through those initiatory practices, you can also explore other underworld planes as well. Okay, and again, the order that you do this is not always important as long as your system is adequately prepared. So before, getting into a death energy related initiation, whether it's through the Da'ath, whether it's through Ginnungagap, you have to have gone through a process of merging your consciousness with other types of planes and currents of energy to adequately prepare your system for that. For example, with the Qliphoth, you can't just jump straight into the abyss. You have to go through the process of moving through the lower 7 spheres, going through that deconstruction process before your system is going to be ready to embrace the deconstruction and realistically the just pure, intangible, meaningless energy that can come from initiating into the Da'ath, the Qliphothic abyss. So adequately preparing for that in depth. There are also numerous underworld planes that you can merge your consciousness with as well to increase your aptitude for death energy. And these can be more dangerous endeavors if your system is not adequately prepared. Okay, so some examples would be realms of the dead that appear within different mythology. Okay, so the most notable in my experience is Irkala. Okay, the Sumerian underworld that is ruled by Ereshkigal, which is essentially like a different aspect of Hecate. Merging your consciousness with this plane will help you to download the current of the undead into your system so that you can start operating and resurrecting exiled aspects of your psyche and start expressing them within your day-to-day. Okay, so merging your consciousness with a realm of the dead, a realm whereby undead gods dwell. What you're doing symbolically is that you are essentially merging your consciousness with aspects of yourself which are undead. Okay, what that basically means is exiled aspects of you. Okay, repressed child parts of yourself that have been so repressed to the point where they've almost been killed off, but not killed off completely, but they're almost like a zombie level of consciousness, like barely conscious, sort of been shut out in the dark. What you're doing when you are interacting with a plane of the dead, such as Irkala, you are essentially performing a big soul retrieval process and are basically giving the most exiled aspects of your psyche permission to come to the surface to be integrated. So what will happen once you merge your consciousness with a realm such as Irkala, the Sumerian underworld, the land of the dead, you are going to gain access to the aspects of yourself that have been completely exiled and refused. And these are going to be some quite triggering aspects of you because you will have exiled them for a reason, because you would have learnt that they are not safe to feel. And these can be very deep, dark portions of the self, such as repressed perversions, such as even repressed past mistakes, things like that. You know, if you've hurt people in the past and it's not a reality that you want to face, or, you know, if you've, you know, got an aspect of you that is, you know, that has some quite harsh sexual perversions, for example, these are things that are going to be by default, because of our society, exiled into symbolic realms within the unconscious mind, which are representative of the lands of the dead, such as Irkala. So you're not initiating into anything that actually exists outside of you, but what you're doing when you initiate into a realm of the dead is that you are bringing a big light into this extremely dark plane, and you're essentially performing a rescue mission, a form of soul rescue or soul retrieval, which then will bring the exiled parts back into your nervous system, into your conscious mind. And following that initiation, you will have these deeper rooted parts of you coming to the surface. Okay, so Irkala is one example. Another example is Helheim. Okay, Helheim, seen as, again, another land of the dead. This one is within Norse mythology. But Helheim is ruled by the goddess Hel, or Hela, as well as other spirits and emissaries of this plane as well. And merging your consciousness with that is very similar to Irkala in the sense that you are then going into a symbolic underworld structure whereby you are performing a retrieval of the aspects of yourself that are exiled or symbolically undead, so that you can then welcome them back into your nervous system. Okay, another example would be the realm of Yomi. Okay, many realms that are symbolic of the undead. Okay, and this can link in very beautifully with practices of necromancy as well. Okay, so occult practices that work actively with the death current. This is very much tied to the work of the psychopomp. Okay, very much tied to work with undead gods. Okay, interacting with undead gods, but when you are interacting with undead gods, you are making the conscious decision to unearth these exiled aspects of you in a clear and conscious way. And this is something that many people don't realize about necromancy. Okay, necromancy isn't just communicating with spirits of the dead, spirits that are undead. Okay, psychopomp like work. Okay, necromancy is not just about that, but the real alchemy that comes with necromancy from an alchemical standpoint is facing yourself facing the aspects of yourself that are undead, that have been so pushed away and so neglected to the point where they are almost taking on a symbolic zombie-like form within your unconscious mind. In other words, it's like a portion of yourself that is active, still alive, but sort of detached, dissociated from entirely. Okay, and we all go through this dissociation process. Okay, so there's a reason why death magic and necromancy, communicating with the dead, is seen as something which is incredibly scary by a lot of New Age communities, purely because you are symbolically facing yourself. Okay, this is the thing. Okay, necromancy, extremely powerful practice, but when you're engaging in necromancy from the perspective of alchemical transformation and self-development, you are consciously going into the parts of yourself that have been completely exiled, and they do take on, by default, some extremely grotesque forms, because that is what you have created and defined for them. Okay, so the typical image of an undead god could be a being that's in like a sort of cloak that's then just pure skull and bone in that respect. And that for many people, if you see that astrally, can be a very triggering appearance in that respect. But all that represents is an aspect of you which is basically on the edge of death. Okay, an aspect of you which has been killed off. And the most challenging thing to really accept about that is the fact that it is a portion of your inner child that has been killed off. Okay. And what happens when these portions of our inner child remain in this sort of zombie-like state or undead state is that we then lose access to them completely. Okay. And this is what can cause some of the deeper, more grotesque human actions to take place, such as physical or sexual abuse and things like that, because of the throttled innocence, the molested inner child that exists within the psyche, and the inner child which has been killed off by the other aspects of the psyche, because we've basically learned that it is not safe to be in that role anymore. So the innocence has been completely destroyed and pushed into this undead state. Okay, so necromancy is an extremely transformative practice because you are going into these exiled aspects and giving them permission to come through. But this is why it can be dangerous practice if you are not prepared for it, because these particular undead gods are going to be very raw mirrors for these aspects of yourself, and many people are not able to adequately handle it and still approach these spirits from the perspective of separation. As I've said in other videos, spirits like this, they have their own consciousness. They are by nature separate from you, but if you interact with them, then there is going to be a mirror there. Okay, there's going to be a mirror for an aspect within you. Okay, so to merge your consciousness with death energy and work actively with the realms of the dead and work actively with undead spirits through necromantic practice is to make the active decision to go and resurrect some of the deepest, most exiled portions of your psyche. Okay, and many people don't realize that when they start interacting with these types of spirits in depth. Okay, so death energy, death magic is a very, very transformative practice that you need to be adequately prepared for before delving into it. Otherwise, it can be quite destructive to the nervous system and can very easily re-traumatize. Okay, it's a bit like if somebody hasn't done any personal development before and they go straight into these deeper necromantic practices because they want to be the psychopomp and communicate with the dead. What happens? Yeah, they go into it, they start facing these aspects of themselves, and then they get re-traumatized by these aspects of themselves. Okay, because these undead can appear as very angry. They can hold on to a lot of rage. They can hold on to a lot of unprocessed energy and emotion purely because you have neglected them. Okay, so the undead gods are even more rejected, okay, by our modern world, by our conscious mind, even more rejected than, say, a demonic spirit such as Lucifer, Lilith, Hecate, those types of beings. Okay, so to adequately prepare for death energy, working with deities that are aspects of death itself and working with them with that intention will help to prepare your system for undergoing deeper alchemical transformation as a result of interacting with the death current. Okay, so Hecate is a very good one. There's also a very powerful angelic metagod called Mortefel, very unique entity, which is an aspect of the positively charged void that exists beyond the Sephiroth in general. He's an aspect of death energy. Pardon me, Santa Muerte, very potent energy, very powerful, extremely powerful Santa Muerte, but again, one that is a very raw expression of death energy and does need a lot of respect, as do all spirits, but this one in particular. Okay, as well as many other aspects of death itself. So starting your work with spirits that are aspects of death itself, you will find that you go through a natural process of what we call necroscopic alchemy, which is alchemy induced by the death current, which will then help your nervous system to alchemize and process death energy as a whole. If you are on a deeper initiatory process as well, such as the Qliphoth, such as even the Sephiroth, to be honest with you, can trigger energetic death as well, and other shamanic based initiatory systems, then you are already in that process of shedding, and you're open to that continuous process, and you're not creating these illusions whereby, oh, I've attained everything that I need to, when realistically you're putting yourself into a box. Then that's a sign that you are going to be a little bit more comfortable with interacting with the death current in depth. Okay, and once your system is adequately prepared through these initiatory systems or through interaction with these spirits, or preferably both, then you can start the process of actually merging your consciousness with various spirits and underworld planes that have a very strong presence and source of death energy as a whole. Okay, so the benefits of really interacting with this current of energy as a result of it is extreme transformation, accelerated transformation, resilience to all aspects of intrusions, both physically and energetically, the ability to alchemize any energy extremely quickly. Okay, intrusive energy attachments, entities, astral parasites stop becoming a problem for you when you are merging your consciousness with the death current, purely because you are basically becoming a void in that sense. Yeah, and a void consumes, deconstructs, and then reconstructs in a new way. So your energy body is going to be trained in a way that is able to pull energies in and then spit them out and actually radiate in a much more healthy way. Okay, so this happens by either absorbing a large quantity of death energy and dark matter energy, or by merging your consciousness with these different planes, such as Helheim, Irkala, like I've mentioned, particularly the Qliphothic Abyss of Darth, as it causes a shift within the energy body, an alchemical change that causes what is negative to become positive and vice versa, which means your energy body is wired to actually consume energy and then basically radiate it outwards, exactly like a void does. Okay, deconstructs and then reconstructs from the ashes. Okay, so when you're merging with death energy, you are merging with nature. You are merging with that natural current of transformation and metamorphosis within the cosmos, and you are going to undergo significant processes of evolution at an extremely accelerated rate. You're going to undergo a significant amount of evolution within an extremely short space of time by embracing the death energy. But if you want to interact with this current of energy, be sure to not do too much too quickly. Okay, work slowly. introduce the death energy consciously into your nervous system gradually. When you first start to interact with this current of energy, you'll probably get quite tired. Okay, you'll probably need to sleep more. And if that happens, then definitely go with it in that respect. Yeah, don't be pushing yourself when you're interacting with death energy and your system is new to it, then it will make you very tired. But the reason for that is because there's excess energy, excess portions of death energy in your system that need to be metabolized, and sleeping is a very good way of doing that. Yeah, so, it often happens, if you're training your energy body to consume things, often you will get quite tired and will need to sleep more in order to help your system to metabolize that energy in a sustainable and effective way. So be careful not to do too much too quickly. And again, really assess whether this current of energy is really for you. It's definitely not somewhere to start. It's definitely not something for beginners within these types of practices. You have to be familiar with the process of death and rebirth. You have to ideally have shifted your reality into a fluid structure that supports your continuous rebirth. In that respect, you have to be used to the process of continuous self-development and not thinking that you're done and that you've got to a point where all of your trauma is healed and things like that. And more than anything, you've got to be prepared to face some of the deepest, most exiled aspects of yourself that are mirrored back to you when you work with undead gods. Okay, so extremely transformative, but I think that's everything that I need to say on this current of energy. I could go on for a lot longer, but if you have any questions about this current of energy, feel free to get in touch. I have numerous initiatory systems and practices that are available within my Patreon, even more so within the Sephirah Shamanic School, the premium membership. I have lots of initiatory systems and practices that can help you to effectively prepare your system to interact with this current of energy in a safe and effective way. Links are in the description. But for now, thank you guys. Hit like and subscribe if this video was helpful to you, and I will see you within the next video. Thank you.